Today, I'm delighted to interview Jack Skeels. Jack is an award-winning author and Inc. 500 entrepreneur. He's also a former think tank researcher at RAND. His recent book, Unmanaged, Master the Magic of Creating Empowered and Happy Organizations, has received accolades from industry and reviewers, most recently winning the gold medal for independent thought leadership in the prestigious Axiom 2024 Business Book Awards. As CEO of Agency Agile, he has been published and featured over 35 times, including The Wall Street Journal, Ad Age, Entrepreneur.com, Adweek, Campaign, PR News, Business Horizons, Training, and numerous other publications. So I'm very fortunate to have him with me. Welcome, Jack.
Oh, hi, Jenny. So nice to be here and great to see you again as well.
It's great to see you too, because obviously we were working together with David C. Baker in Atlanta in March. So it's only a couple of months ago that we were both on stage, and I really was loving your content, and I'm dying to get into the questions. So let's go straight into the questions, Jack, and let's talk about the book Unmanaged. Can you just share with us, why did you write this book?
I think probably the best way to think about it is back when I first started, I'm an old dog as well, right? So
You and me
back in the
both.
early 80s, I was what was called programmer back then. They used so many different words. But I knew I was a sharp kid and I got hired into this big company and programming was kind of new. And all of my managers knew way less about all this stuff that was just happening, computers and all that. And I was always struck by, why do we need managers? And what I didn't really realize is that I was actually part of right in the middle of a big tidal wave of knowledge work, right? That we were shifting to a knowledge work economy, and it changes the nature of managing, actually as it turns out. And the traditional ideas about managing, which were good but not necessarily great, became more archaic as we went into this world of knowledge work. And the reality is today, for example, in agencies, especially because they are such high intensity organizations, we don't manage correctly and we actually overmanage, and it reduces productivity. And so the book is filled with that, of course. The title came from the idea I wanted to be, of course, as an author, you always want to be provocational, right? In other words, can I have someone go, what in the hell do you mean by that? And the idea was, hey, my team is completely unmanaged, which sounds like a fireable offense, right? Like, why aren't you managing your team? And my response would be, well, my unmanaged team is outperforming your managed team, right? And so that's sort of the gist of it, is you can do more better managing by managing less, actually.
Can you give us an example of what you mean by overmanaged? Give me an example of where this used to happen a lot, or it happens still a lot.
Well, so I'll do two-part answer on this. I think the first part that's really important, it's originally I was going to call the book The Manager Tax, because there's something managers don't understand about managing, which is literally, this is proven in the business research over and over, the intensity of managing. In other words, the more managerial activities you do, the more managerial actions, the more active your managers are, has an inverse relationship to productivity. More managing means less productivity. And I'll give you a quick example of that. And I'm going to go to your real life today. A quick example of that is that if I'm an old-fashioned manager managing an assembly line, I've got 8 people and they're just assembling things. And I decide I'm going to do something managerial. I'll call them into a 2-hour meeting today. Okay. What happens to productivity? When they're in the meeting, it goes down. This is nothing new. Okay, this is something that happens every day inside of an agency. Here's part 2 of the answer. I'm an account person. Okay, I'm concerned because of this, what I described in the book, a multi workplace, multi-project, multi-allocated, multi-discipline projects and complexity and the chaos of the whole agency. I'm concerned my stuff isn't going to get done by Friday. So what do? I call a meeting for Friday. I put a meeting on people's calendar for Friday, removing them from them the ability to get work done during that hour, right? Removing from them the ability to get work done during that hour. And all in the name of my individual project's productivity. So what will happen is I call this meeting wars. This is a great example of it. Managers will put meetings on the calendars as ways of trying to create localized productivity on their project, not realizing that I just took an hour of productivity out of that person's week, and that hour of productivity will come out of other people's projects. And so essentially what we can do is we can overmanage workers into non-productivity.
So is the one of the big factors is that the managers are taking up too much time because they want to manage. What about the other way around, when the person being managed needs to speak to that manager because maybe they don't know how to do the task properly, but they have to call a meeting with their manager? Is it just working the same way, or is mentorship and coaching another kind of?
No, it's a great question. So let's just do a little stop by the question of what is the purpose of the manager? And how do we measure a manager? I've got a great little section on it, and it's also we just published a snippet of the book online called The Measure of the Manager. How should you measure a manager? A manager, like in that simple example I gave, a manager should be measured by the productivity that they create. And so in essence, this whole idea is that I, as a manager, I should be looking at every single action and say, does this action lead to greater productivity or not? Right? And so I've got a choice. This person, Jeremy, is asking me if I have a few minutes to talk about this idea and see if I like what he's doing with it. Is that going to enhance Jeremy's productivity? Hell yeah, of course it will. Yes, I should absolutely do it. As opposed to me putting a meeting on Jeremy's schedule for later this week to just see how things are going, right? So that's absolutely the funny thing, and this is the idea of servant management, right? And a lot of people get that idea, well, yeah, I should be at the whatever. But servant management, the real reason for doing servant management is you want to boost the production function. And nobody knows how productivity works as well as the people who are actually trying to be productive. Okay? Nobody understands that. No manager understands what gets in the way of productivity anywhere near as well as workers understand what's getting in the way of their productivity.
It all makes sense. It all makes perfect sense. So let's think about this management function in the context of agencies specifically. Where do you think agencies are going wrong with how they're currently operating? Because you understand the agency typical model very well. You know, I know you get invited in by some of the biggest and most well-known agencies in the world. Where do you see common issues with the way they're structured in terms of management?
Yeah, I think that it's a great question. So one is, if you there's several. That's such a great question. Several pieces to this. One of which is, if you don't get the idea that you can overmanage, then you will have the bias of every problem you see in the way things are happening in your mind says, maybe we need another manager for that. Okay? And at some point, and by the way, we work with every size agency. We worked with 230 different agencies, helping them gain more productivity. If you look at the 5-person, we were very small ones, smallest agency, 5-person agency, but most 5-person agencies don't have an overmanaging problem because they don't have many managers, right? Yeah. And when an agency gets around 25, 30, 40 people right in that zone, all of a sudden there's an explosion of managers. And this is that tipping point where all of a sudden more managing does more damage than it does help. Okay. It's managing. When you're at 10 people, management is a reaction, like the question you posed for me earlier, right? In other words, Management is Jeremy comes to me and needs some help. I'll go be manager right now, and put down what I was working on. We're small enough. I'm a manager, but I'm a worker too, right? And so there's a point at which we start creating departments of managers. This is sort of mind bending. People don't even think about it. Why are there so many managers in an agency? 50-person agency, 15 managers, 20 managers. They're crazy numbers. It's because we make whole departments of managers. Like in your profession, you do great work with account teams and but that's a department of managers, right? It's not a department with a manager. It has a manager, yes, but it's a department full of managers. Same thing, project management. And all of a sudden we start just without recognizing the costs of having managers, we start just creating managers. And this is sort of the big, to go back to your question, it's one of the biggest challenges is how do I think about what we're doing here in a way that says what should be managed and what should be unmanaged? So unmanaged means we don't need a manager. We can otherwise manage it, as in let our people manage it and that kind of thing.
So let's talk specifically about account management then. Let's have a hypothetical agency.
Fun.
This is going to get fun and really interesting. This is why I really want to understand. And the listeners, I'm sure, are kind of leaning in like, hang on a minute, is my job at risk here?
I was a group account director for a bunch of years, so I'm one of you. So yeah, I know the job well and loved it.
So one way of thinking about this is, let's suppose we've got the client, and let's suppose we've got an internal design team, the graphic designer and the copywriter, and then you've got the account manager in the middle. Now, the way the whole agency business model was set up originally was that the copywriter and the designer need to get on with their craft, but the client's asking questions, causing problems, wants the invoice, wants the cost estimate. So you insert someone in between to manage that relationship with the client so that the copywriter and designer can be highly productive in generating their art and the output. So
right.
how do we look at this through a different lens now?
Well, I think so what you're talking, here's the lens I use, okay? And when you look at the business research on how organizations operate, the idea here, it's an old the .com era appropriated, it's called intermediation, okay? So what we're doing, if we think about the one-person agency, that's me, I'm a creative director, designer who can do everything enough, and I'm talking to the client. There are no intermediaries, right? And I'll have to figure out how to send an invoice later, whatever, that kind of thing. But as the organization grows, we start intermediating, right? I start having either the designer or have a manager who maybe is mostly between me and the client. I've got an account person who's and the problem is that the greater the distance, you got this dilemma, okay? And that's a very fair dilemma. One is if you involve the team member, worker in every interaction with the client, then when do they get any work done? Mm-hmm. And that's a very valid need for account people, is to do the administrative function in the client relationship. The mistake is when the account person intermediates the work connection. In other words, the nature of the work. There's real interesting work, by the way, on this idea of deception. Okay, and deception sounds really evil, but in the research space, deception means something very simple. It's if I hear something from one person and then tell it to another person, how accurately do I share that? Okay, and a lot of people think this is like what used to be called the telephone game, where you pass information along, right? But it's not that. It's even weirder. It's that if I have like Jeremy and Angela are two people I'm going to tell, okay, and I take this information from the client, I tell Jeremy, and then I go tell Angela, which I'm going to do because maybe I can't interrupt them both at the same time or something like that. Okay. But here's the question. Do I tell them the same thing?
Probably
and
not.
The answer is no. I tell them slightly different things. And in fact, it's stylized for what I think they need to hear. Okay. not necessarily what they need, but what I think they need to hear out of what the client said.
Mm.
And I start compartmentalizing. And I start saying, well, Jeremy really doesn't need to know about the implementation of this thing. I'm just going to give him the feedback that the client didn't like red, the color red. And Angela, on the other hand, what she care about the design, right? I'm going to tell her about the platform thing that he brought up, where those two things may interact. Okay, I mean, I'm just making up an example. It turns out that if in fact we turn it the other way around, rather than driving it from I'll decide what gets through to the team kind of thing, the minute I hear as an account person, I hear that we're talking about the work, okay, then I need to get them involved, and I need to get them involved in a structured. I need to manage it, facilitate it, everything, but I need to have them hearing what the client and understand what the client is saying. And there's an even bigger reason is that, as we know about communication, a lot of it's nonverbal. Okay.
Mm.
So if you think about it, and the number everyone throws out is only 30% of communication is nonverbal, right? Okay. So if that's true, I mean, even make it 50%. That's fine. I don't know. 50% is no, I'm sorry. Only 30% of conversation is verbal. The rest is nonverbal. But let's say it's 50-50. That means just the act of intermediating is reducing the information content by 50%. Throw in that the inherent, intrinsic, deceptive thing I will do that I can't even control, right? And I start getting really muddy. And if you boost that team size up to like 7 people, and it's a big project with a bunch of pieces, and maybe I've got 3 account people because I've got my account director and 2 account managers, and they're like taking turns sharing things between themselves, and then maybe telling the teams. I've got teams that are lost, okay?
Mm.
And a lost team spends more time trying to figure out how to get unlost than they do getting the work done.
Wow. So it makes total sense, but at the same time, it's quite a bombshell because we've been operating like this for so long. And I suppose, you said earlier on the intermediary, as soon as there's some information coming from the client, what they should do is get the designer and the copywriter involved so they can hear it firsthand. However, doesn't that go back to the client's on the phone, stop what you're doing, and then interrupting their productivity again?
I think look, I think I said this, we were talking, or I don't know if I said it at the conference to everyone or just to you also. Look, I wouldn't hire, I used to run a couple agency offices. I don't hire account people for their ability to say yes to the client, okay? I would hire them for their ability to say no, their ability to say maybe, how about later, how about soon, right? And so the ability to sculpt that relationship, right? And you do a lot of great work. I saw your presentations. The shaping of the dialogue is absolutely key function for an account person to do. And I would look for things like, my metaphorical client is Kathy. That's what I always use my example, because I had a great client who taught me so much. I said, Kathy, this is great stuff. What I really think is important, I think we need to get you and the team together. Okay. So can we pick a time really soon where we can all get together, and I can ask them later this afternoon. I'm going to wait till a good time to do that, right? I'm going to ask them later this afternoon when they might be able to meet tomorrow morning. What are your opportunities? What's your schedule look like? And so, look, I'm problem solving. I mean, Kathy knows I care. I'm being thoughtful about this, and we're trying to really take her input and make it valuable. And I would go to the team and say, Kathy's got some input, and I would have passed it along. But I think you guys need to hear it and tell me whether do you need other information? Because just think about it. I mean, even if I passed it along, they'd have a question. Again, we'd get into this sort of cycle of back and forth and losing information every time we do that. So it's an art, and as you know, I mean, account management's an art. The artistic skill I look for a lot of times is that exact balance you're talking about. It is, how do I enable as much productivity as I can, but also enable as much transparency and direct interaction.
Great. Let's talk about the project management role. Do the same rules apply? Because I read, and this might be going off track, but stop me if you say in your book there are three types of organization: the project driven, the process driven, and the product driven.
Right.
And the same project management techniques are used for all three, and yet that doesn't work. So
Yeah.
can you,
Yeah.
maybe this will throw light on the project management role?
Yeah. So the project management is massively misunderstood from a application perspective. I'll give you a couple of little pieces of it. One is if you go look at, and I invite your listeners to do this, go Google project management training and like, or project management degree, college degree, uni kind of thing. And look at that curriculum. Look at what they say a project manager is responsible for. It's like everything. Like the list is a project manager is, basically a superhero, right? Or that kind of thing. And that should be your first warning sign. the the reality is project management is a craft, a trade, a set of skills and profession that found its origins in construction. Okay. And building things that we already understand well is a very, very different thing than building things we don't understand well. Okay. And project management can work in these very stable situations like project managing a factory or project managing building a house when we already have a blueprint. These are really good uses for project management. The diagram you're referring to in the book talks about the idea of a project-driven organization is an organization where we're doing something different every time. And a lot of times, and the way to think about this is, here's a conversation everybody in every agency has heard, okay? I've got a project manager inside of an agency who's saying, yeah, but how long is creative going to take? And what do the creatives say back, Jen? What's the creative's response?
How long's a piece of string?
Yeah, exactly. How would I know? I don't even know what I'm doing yet.
Yeah.
Okay. And so this is the utter futility of project management in an uncertain project environment. And here's the biggest problem is that you ask someone to do something and they will do it. And the question is, what's the side effect of that? And I go into this in the book, and it was the most fun part of the book to write because I'd lived it so many times. Here I am, and I used to do this, okay? I was a project, that's where I went after programmer, by the way, as a project manager for like 20 years. Someone tells me they don't know how long it'll take, and I say, well, how long did it take last time? And they say, I don't know, 18 hours, maybe something like that. I go, okay, cool, I'll plug 18 in. Okay. Is 18 the right number? No, they just told me they don't know how long it's going to take. But I put a number in there. I put some other numbers in there. I do my Gantt chart and my resource allocation, and I come up with a plan. Okay. And the plan is utter bullshit. Okay. But I did a plan. My job is to create a project plan. And so now I show everyone that project plan. And what does it look like? It looks like we understand everything about the project, but we don't. But I've actually created something that lies to everyone and lets everyone just go, oh, we can stop asking questions. Jack has this whole thing handled.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. And that's the futility. And then at the end, does the project manager get blamed for that schedule? No, never. Right. There's always, look, there are plenty of other reasons. Creative took more than 18 hours. We had 18 hours on the schedule. Creative said they didn't know, but I said that it was 18 hours, right? And so it's a very, very strange, and I'll cap that off, and then I'm sure you have some fun comments on this. We know a lot of agencies, and certainly some we've worked with, who have either decreased the amount of project managing they're trying to do, or we had a great one we worked with a year and a half ago where the CEO said, yeah, I totally figured that out. I just got rid of all the project managers. Things go way better. It's better for us to know we don't know than to pretend that we do.
Wow. So after that bombshell comment, I suppose going back to, you've worked with 230 agencies, just with the example you gave me, and you've made them more efficient and saved them costs. With everything we're talking about here, what's the alternative way of doing things, Jack? Like, if you were to give us the three key things that, because maybe there's an agency owner listening that, okay, it may all make sense. And we are in a very uncertain world because a lot of agencies are working on projects that require a new set of thinking. They're doing something different for the first time. There's no one, it's pretty bespoke. So what is the solution? How do we do these? How do we approach this type of work differently?
Yeah, I think from an agency owner perspective, I'm going to draw on, and I've got several of these examples in the book, but this one is one that I just came up with the other day. And that's the problem with writing a book, by the way. It's like afterwards, I have a whole thing on meetings I've developed that is like, I want to just replace it and I can, but it's just like, oh, why did I write it that way? It's really this way. But here's the one I came up with that's like CEO level, which is stop trying to become a factory. Okay. And you are not a factory. You'll never, if you're a factory, here's what the factory looks like. Everybody shows up for work that day and they go, all right, what are we making today? And someone goes, well, I need this thing. I'm not sure how to describe it, but it's not a factory, right? That's not what, and every agency owner wants to, and our CEO wants to get to this. We just need to be able to scale. And I can tell you empirically, just we have the data on this. It's crazy. Having worked with all these, the more you try to become a factory, the worse your organization gets. Okay. And you don't need to become a factory to scale. What you need to do is actually be the anti-factory. You need to be set up so people are ready to show up every day and go, okay, what was it we need to figure out and do? And you need to be organized around that rather than the idea that you have a production line. And that's one of the biggest shifts means that, in a sense, it's not a bunch of managers structuring how work flows, okay? But it's really about squads and pods of people that go, what are we going to attack today and how are we going to get it done? And how do we best allocate our resources? And that sort of quasi self-management works quite well. It works quite well in other organizations that aren't agencies. And it's I think, single biggest mistake, and I think a lot of times agencies want to grow and get purchased and all that kind of thing. But the single biggest mistake is to try to achieve scale through traditional managing.
And how do you quote for the work if you have these kind of agile little squads that are, working together in a very efficient way? But we've got to give the, if the client, for example, doesn't want to pay us a retainer, they want to play on project. How do we work that out?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, that's a whole thing we teach, right? And I'll give you the gist of it. Absolutely. It's not simple. One is, there are a couple of key ideas. One of which is the price that we sell it for is not necessarily the price that we'll have to deliver it at. Okay. Agencies live with this all the time. Okay. This is what agencies don't live with is the acceptance of it. Right. And so at the end of the day, most agencies have a rework rate or an overage rate or whatever you want to call it, about 25 to 40%, 25 to 40%, right? So, and they survive, okay? So it's okay that they don't get the sales price right, okay? And they deliver, right? And they deliver and it costs more than they planned. That is actually not broken, okay? It's just that people don't like the idea that I've got two different numbers like that. In reality, what I really want to do is just not be surprised by the second number. Okay. When I get surprised by that second number, and this is called project contagion. Okay. In other words, if I thought I sold it for 1,000 hours, but I know it's going to come in at probably, just because of history, it's going to come in at 1,300 hours, right? The question is, how soon do I get my arms around that, right? And figure out how to not have that 1,300 hours surprise me. Because if it surprises me, if I'm like 800 hours in the project, and all of a sudden I realize I'm going to need an extra 300 hours, where do I get those people from? I take them from other projects. I take them from projects that haven't even started yet. And here's something everyone has heard in an agency. We had 8 weeks to get this done. Why did we start 4 weeks late? You started 4 weeks late because the 300 hours surprised you and you had to pull people off and you couldn't get the team together to actually get started on time. So that project that went over, and you shouldn't have been surprised, okay? That project that went over then made another project go sideways, right? And so the answer to all of this is to actually treat it like we've got two scopes. I've got the scope that I'm trying to sell, okay? Dollars, hours, whatever it takes to get the client to say, frankly, to say yes, it with good enough of a number. And then we teach how to do this. Then the minute it comes in, I want to get the team to look at it. And teams are far better at estimating realistically, right? Because the teams are the one who live trying to make up those 300 hours when all that stuff happens, and have the team go through the scope and identify any other things they need to know and how we're going to handle these things and give a more accurate estimate. And I'm going to spend those 300 hours either way. The question is, are those hours going to destroy other projects in the process? Okay. I'm going to pretend they're not going to happen. Maybe this time it won't happen. Or do I just say, fine, I know there's probably going to be a little bit of a fire in this project. Let's start working on firefighting from day one in the project. And that changes agencies dramatically, drops the rework rate, drops the contagion rate, boosts margin, makes everyone a lot happier, all that kind of thing. But again, it's just dropping your assumptions about how clean this business is, because it's a messy, uncertain business.
Wow. So two scopes. So you said the first one, you set the price to whatever you think it is, but then you get the team involved in the scoping themselves so that they kind of do it themselves. So do you facilitate this, Jack, with teams?
Yeah. We absolutely do. And I'm going to just give a little bit more terminology from the book here. So sales scope, okay. By the way, and you know this, and your listeners know this as well. Sales scope is usually given to you, right? You can try as you might to actually give it to the client, but I had my little conversation I remember from a client coming to me and saying, "Hey, we've got $200,000 and we need this holiday campaign by November 15th," right? And I could go, hey, I had this fancy agency agile training and scoping. Let me bring the team in and we'll figure out exactly what this is going to cost. To which my client says, I'm sorry, I guess I wasn't clear enough. I have $200,000 and I need this by November 15th. And there's an agency that calls me every Friday to see if I have any work for them. And I'm sure they will say yes to that. Now, my question is, are you going to say yes to it or not?
Yeah.
And so the marketplace handed me that scope. It handed me the dollars. I have a binary choice. How badly am I going to get burned at that price? I'll probably take it, right? I'll probably survive it, right? Now the question is, how well do we survive it? And that's called delivery scope. So sales scope, don't try to connect the two, right? Sales scope and then work on delivery scope. And we teach how to do that so that and the most important thing is once you figure out what delivery scope really is go back to the client, just explain it to them. So you lock it in. A lot of people don't understand how little the client understands about how you're solving the problem, right?
Okay, so I'm thinking about the project manager in this. And okay, so the client says, this is the sales scope, or this is the budget I've got, make it work. And the agency needs the revenue, so they say yes. The project manager is thinking, actually, for example, we need a UX expert, but we don't have one on staff. So I'm going to have to get a freelancer. But they're still calling the shots. They're still inserting themselves in the process, aren't they? Because they're deciding that they need someone, and they've got to do the liaison, call round the freelancers, see who's available to come in. So in the scenario where we're trying to eliminate, or not eliminate completely, but really unmanage rather than manage, do the roles and responsibilities kind of change, Jack? Like if you were working with my agency, for example, and we had that scenario and I'm a project manager, how would I operate differently when it comes to the client's given us 200 grand, we need to deal with this? How would my role change from what it normally would to the way you would apply your methodology?
Yeah, and so I love what you're saying. So I'm going to take the momentum of your example, which would be in a regular agency when when that freelancer came in, it would probably be the project manager and the account manager telling them what to do, right? Okay, and they sort of get partitioned, and a lot of times what happens is project managers break the project up into tiny little pieces so they can tell everybody what, which keeps us from being a team, by the way, right? That sort of separates us rather than unites us, kind of thing. But again, back like we were talking earlier, there is the administrative facilitative function in both roles, account and PM. The role of ensuring that we have the people we need to get the work done, that's productivity enhancing role. Absolutely. That's something you should be doing. You as a manager are increasing productivity by ensuring we've got the right people available to get the work done. Absolutely. Stay to it. You may be enhancing our ability to assess how long the project's going to take, even by, or how much it's going to cost, and that kind of thing by doing that as well. The getting more intermediated into the work itself, not a good move, right? And that's where, so fine, get the freelancer. Now bring the freelancer in with the team, and we teach how to do this. Brief the team and make sure the team has it. And it's not the way you usually brief the team. Usually briefing the team is 30 minutes of basically shouting at them everything you can think of in a 25-page PowerPoint. And this is actually having them do a real learning session where they draw out of you everything they need to know. And so you get a team that's fully understanding the work and the like. And that's the team that can tell you, what do they need, right? What do they need to get it done and the like? And that's like the, back when it's a small agency, that's exactly what happened. That was what an 8-person agency does. New client, holy shit, what are we gonna do? Let's sit around and talk about it and figure it out. And then you've got a plan and they execute it well. So it's the, again, it's the, I love your question. It comes back to this idea of, just because I'm a manager and I have some important managerial responsibilities, I need to be careful about over managing things, over taking ownership of scope, over intermediating if I'm an account person, over directing if I'm a department manager, right? They're all dangerous things, and they bring down the productivity of the agency and the happiness of the people as well.
I love the tip that you shared. I heard you say it to another audience about this way of briefing. And, just as you said, get the team to pull out the information from you. Can you just speak to that a little bit? Because I think that's really, it stuck with me.
Yeah, it's a so our Western management style, and I talk about this in the book, it goes all the way back to military command and control. Okay. And military command and control has the style of, I, as the general or whatever, understand the battlefield way better than you ever will because I can see the whole battlefield, presumably. And therefore, I'm going to give you specific directions about what you should do. And all you need to do is just do what I say, right? And that's the general managerial style. The net effect of that style in an agency is that we blow through the budget and go over by 25 to 40% all the time, right? Okay. So the question is, we really want to get a little bit more of a guerrilla style, if you will, right? The small warts and thing, and say, all right, here's the thing we're trying to take on. How do you guys think we get it done? What do you need to know? And this technique is something that is very underutilized in our Western cultures, actually. Now, if you go look in Japanese management culture, it's called ba. I talk about this in the book, BA. And it's the moment when the executive, and there's a great story that I read related to this with I think it was the head of one of the Japanese motorcycle companies. I won't damage the story by actually giving the wrong name, but he was trying to explain to his engineers how they wanted to make the best racing bike and what it would take to do it. And he felt like every time they made a new prototype bike, it just wasn't good enough. And he finally said, look, let's go out to the track. What he did is he said, let's go on this really sharp curve that they're going past very fast. I'm going to put my hand down on the pavement. I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to listen and feel what I feel when that motorcycle goes by. And I can tell whether that motorcycle's in harmony when it's going by. And they spent the day just doing that till all the engineers understood what it meant to have a motorcycle perform at high speed under stress. And then they won, like 2 years later, they won the motorcycle championships, right? And so, but it's one of these things where it's the leader or the manager says, it isn't enough for me to understand it, okay? It needs to be you that understand it because I can't make the motorcycle, right? I point to your account people and your project managers. It doesn't matter whether you understand the project, okay? It really doesn't. The only value that has is that it means you're a potential teacher, like that executive teaching motorcycles. You're a potential teacher to try to get them up to your level.
Mm. And actually, it's smarter because you're developing their muscle of asking the right question and thinking for themselves, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
So,
you'll become a better teacher too, by the way. Yeah.
yeah, that's a win-win. I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Jack, I'm just conscious of time. I think I'm going a little bit over, but I wanted to get your kind of view on the agency landscape at the moment. You know, you have the benefit of working with lots and lots of agencies, different ones. What do you see changing in the kind of landscape of agencies? What's coming down the pipe that we should be cognizant of and aware of?
Yeah, I think that of course, there's all kinds of talk about AI and the like, and I think that that's a phenomenon that will invade at the craft level in terms of look, there was a point years ago. I was working with Adobe. They were actually a client of mine, but talking to the top executives, and they were saying things like, well, soon trained monkeys will be able to do designs and stuff like that, right? And so, and of course, that didn't happen. And because their tools were going to become so powerful, right? It turns out as tools become more powerful, the good get better, right? The people who learn how to use the tools actually create better stuff. And that's happened, for generations now inside of our business. So I see AI, at least certainly in the near term, as an opportunity to upskill, up capability, up deliver on the promise of agencies. I think there's a bigger question about how does marketing fit in with the client organization? And the real thing is that marketing and advertising, which technically advertising is a part of marketing, right? And the idea of marketing as being a black box function is going away because measurability is increasing. But also the idea that marketing is something which is not new, is something that we do. We do marketing at every interaction, every touch point with the client, right? And the hard problems in the client touch point, the client experience model, are the worthy problems these days. How do we change hearts and minds in through every single interaction? Or how do we solve difficult interactions? And these are consulting questions. Now, you might think, oh, then the consultancies are going to run over the agencies. Consultancies do things over and over and over. You want a system installed, you want a optimization done, there's a new piece of technology, whatever. They're good at it because they've done it a bunch of times and they'll show you what to do. I'm talking about a different thing, which is that you recognize the theme here. I've got a problem in which traditional solutions haven't worked. And I need someone to come in and solve using non-intuitive, or I should say, counterintuitive, inspired, creative techniques to look at this differently. And this is the agency mindset. This is what we hire for in agencies. People who can go, yeah, but what about this? And how about that? And what if we remove those assumptions and looked at these other things? people who understand human behavior really well. This is what agencies don't want to do the same thing twice. And that's the ideal person to hire to solve a problem that the traditional solutions aren't working for. So I think the future of agencies in that way looks like a consultative agency, one that essentially is a little bit more research based, also just using its natural DNA about being innovative.
Love that. It's a lovely spot to finish, actually. Creative problem solvers, because that's what we are. And that's why we're different to the management consultancies. Jack,
Yeah.
this has been brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you for writing the book. I've got it here.
Oh, thank
And
you.
I would really highly recommend it because it really does um, force you, kind of challenge you to think differently. So, Jack, any kind of final words of advice for any agency owner that's listening, thinking that makes total sense, and I've got a feeling that I've got an overmanaged agency business. What would you say to them?
Well, I mean, if I get crassly commercial, which I will for a second here,
Yeah.
is we do a thing that's actually fairly inexpensive and we'll let an agency see. We call it the productivity diagnostic. Remember, I said the key function of management is to ensure productivity, right? And we do this great little workshop. It's fun, it's interesting. You bring in a set of your people, and we'll give you a scorecard on how you're doing in terms of how much you're getting in the way of productivity through over managing or mismanaging or the like. But it creates great conversations, and you'll come away with things that you can actually go do and fix yourself as well. And of course, you'll see where some of our techniques are useful as well. But that's pretty straightforward, and we've got a sample report of that and everything if people want to see it. But I think it's a great way to understand a lot about your agency. We have probably a third to a half of the people who do it with us don't ever end up hiring us, but love the result, for example.
And do you do that all around the world, Jack? Is that it doesn't matter where they are, you can do
Pretty
that?
much, yeah. We have some strange hours we work and the like, and so yeah. No, we're about 70% U.S. based, and the rest is rest of the world. We don't have any non-English speaking capabilities, but anywhere that the fine English language or American version of it is spoken,
And if
we
anyone wants to take you up on that, what's the best place to reach you or reach a
yeah,
member of your team?
reach out to me on LinkedIn. Absolutely works. It's very easy and the like, or you can go to agencyagile.com. And
Fantastic.
we've got contact form, of course. So yeah.
Wonderful. Jack, thank you so much for joining me. This has been brilliant.
Jenny, thank you so much. Wonderful questions and delightful conversation. I appreciate it very much.